Jake and Mary had been neighbors for as long as anyone could remember. Their houses sat side by side on a quiet hill, separated by a wooden fence that had once been nothing, more than a simple marker of their properties. But over time, the fence grew taller, stronger, and more imposing, not because of necessity, but because of the silent war between them. They hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Jake would help Mary carry her groceries, and Mary would leave freshly baked bread on Jake's porch. But one day they argued over a tree that grew between their properties. Jake claimed the branches hung too far over his yard, while Mary insisted the roots belonged to her land. The argument escalated into cold glares, silent treatment, and eventually the fence. For years they coexisted in stubborn isolation. Jake spent his mornings reading under his tree, pretending he didn't hear Mary humming while she tended to her flowers. Mary spent her evenings on the porch, ignoring the glow of Jake's lamp flickering through the window. Neither acknowledged the other, as if refusing to exist in the same world. Then one stormy night, lightning struck. The fire started in Jake's woodshed, the flames licking hungrily at the dry wood. The wind carried the embers, and before long, the fire spread toward the fence, the same fence that had stood between them for years. Jake fought the fire alone at first, using buckets of water, his old garden hose, anything he could find. But the flames were too strong, and in the chaos he realized something terrifying. The fire was creeping toward Mary's house, and if it reached her wooden porch, there would be no stopping it. For the first time in years, Jake did something he never thought he would do. He ran to Mary's door and pounded on it. Mary, startled by the desperate knocks, opened the door to find Jake, soaked and breathless. The fire is spreading. He shouted, "I can't stop it alone." Without hesitation, Mary grabbed a bucket and ran outside. She didn't think about their past arguments, the years of silence, or the pride that had kept them apart. She only knew one thing: this was her neighbor, and he needed her help. Together they fought the flames, calling out directions, working in sync like they had never been enemies. Water splashed, smoke filled the air, but neither of them stopped until the last ember was extinguished. When the fire was finally out, they stood side by side, breathing heavily, covered in soot. Then they looked around. The fence, their towering wall of division, was almost entirely burned away. Only charred posts remained, standing as a reminder of their years of resentment. Mary was the first to speak. "Maybe we don't need to rebuild that." Jake, after a long pause, said, "Yeah, maybe we don't." And for the first time in years, they smiled at each other, not as enemies, but as neighbors. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us that we were never meant to face life alone.